that's really the trick. So I don't use the word finding clients. I talk about creating clients. And that book I've designed as a coaching experience. I realized, well, I'm going to write a book about how to get 100K clients. How do you get 100K clients? You create so much value that people think it's a no-brainer to invest $100,000 over here because I can see I'm going to get 10 times the value, whether it's financial and all sorts of other ways. So I've designed that book as a coaching experience. Every couple of chapters, there's a QR code that you'll click on and you'll see a video of me talking to my phone, so it feels very intimate. What did I say? How do you scale intimacy? I'm not trying to sell that book to 100,000 people. I'm not trying to get that book. I don't care if it's an Amazon bestseller or I'm not trying to get a New York Times bestseller. It's for the right people. And so I've designed it as a coaching experience. And one of the ways I like to coach is to have counterintuitive thinking.
Okay, Rich, welcome to the show. Now, let's start with a question I'm curious to ask you. If you were starting from scratch and nobody knew who Rich Litvin was, and your goal was to make a name for yourself in the coaching world, what would be some of the key things you would focus on?
Can I mess with your question? Because I think the desire to make a name for yourself is what gets in the way of too many people. The people who are the most successful in life or in business are not the ones who start with that premise, how do I make a name for myself? They think about how can I create value? How can I make a difference? How can I change people's lives? So that's what I would do. In fact, I wrote a book that came out in 2014, so 11 years ago, called The Prosperous Coach. And I would go back to that model. I would literally, one conversation at a time, see how I could serve the person in front of me so powerfully that they never forgot that conversation for the rest of their lives. And that's it. I do it one conversation at a time. I have spent the last 3 or 4 years where I've invested over $400,000 on marketing experts to help me grow my business. I grew for almost a decade a word of mouth business by teaching coaches how to build a word of mouth business. And then there came a moment 3 or 4 years ago, I just got tired of watching these people who are not coaches, who are great internet marketers, teaching coaches. And I said, I've been coaching for almost 20 years. Let me play that game. And I dived in, and you can see, if you look at my YouTube videos on my Instagram, I did all the stuff you're supposed to do. And no, it didn't work for me. It wasn't my thing because I'm a word of mouth person. I'm a serve the person in front of me person. So I can be all right. My Instagram videos aren't bad. They tick all the boxes, just didn't bring clients in. So I've gone back to doubling down. What I'm not interested in is scaling. What I'm interested in is scaling intimacy. And that's not a thought I hear people talk about very often. So if I was starting from scratch, I would serve my ass off, create as much value as I can for each person I'm with, and I would find ways to scale intimacy, to scale the impact I have, rather than scale the business I want to have.
Beautiful. So at the core of your approach is just an obsession with creating as much value as you can for the people you want to serve and putting that out into the world.
That's the heart of entrepreneurship.
For sure. And I love this phrase of...
What you're doing, I've looked at the stuff that you create with all your online summits. You get the most extraordinary people together. You create so much value for people that they talk about you. They want to come back for more, or they tell their friends. It's not rocket science. We keep searching for this magical thing over here that will tell us, like, if I only do that, it will take me to the next level. What we do is an old-fashioned approach to business. Create so much value for people that they don't stop talking about you. Can you do some internet marketing on top? Yeah, of course you can. You can do YouTube and all sorts of stuff on top if you want to. But at the heart of it, if you're not creating value, you can have all the followers you like, all the Instagram likes and social media be known, but you don't make any money because you're not really creating value.
For sure. This, these summits, I spend a year.
So that siren is the sound of the universe agreeing with me.
Yeah. So these summits, I spend a year interviewing a set of experts on a specific topic. So this year it's coaching, last year it was attachment, year before that it was addiction, year before that it was psychotherapy. So for me, these are just amazing research projects where I get to just explore the things I'm most curious to learn about. And I'm aware you have done something similar with regards to confidence when you were first starting out. Can you maybe tell us about that? And do you think there's anything in there that other coaches or other people might be able to maybe apply in their own lives as well?
Yeah, I think a research project is a great way to either when you're starting in coaching, you don't know where am I going to, is there a niche? What am I going to talk about? Who am I going to work with? Do a research project. Find something that if you were paid not a single penny, but you could research this topic for a year, you'd get so much back that you would do it for free. Like that's a research project, and it has to be related to growing your business too. And so, yeah, when I started coaching, I'd lacked confidence for so much in my life. I learned how to make it look like I was confident, but underneath it, I was nervous. I was insecure. I was trying to prove myself to whoever I was with, and that's still inside of me. Before this call, I was like, okay, let me find a suit that I can put on. Let me dress up nicely for. And it's like, you know what? This is me. In fact, one of the things I discovered as I studied confidence for 2 years, I traveled around the world, meeting what I called the world's most confident people. I interviewed a guy who got paid to break into banks for a living, a bit like that heist at the Louvre. He would do physical break-ins as well as online break-ins. I met people who've been on Oprah, all sorts of people. Some people were famous. And I came up with this simple definition that confidence is feeling comfortable in your own skin. This is me. And you're either going to like me or you're not going to like me. And so I got a biggest gift for me. And I'm still learning it. Like I said, my insecurity came up before this call even started. But that's the biggest gift for me. That research project changed everything. I learned about myself. Of course, I also learned about things that drew clients to me. And my first ever website was actually called thatconfidenceguy.com. And I only had it for a couple of years. I think I still own the URL, but I realized, oh, I don't overtly coach around confidence. What I coach around is power, and I help people to remember how powerful they are because most of us have forgotten. And my gift, because I felt powerless for so long, is that no matter how powerful you are, I can see that place where you're holding back your power or you're leaking power. And that's my gift as a coach. And it ends up looking like confidence. But that's the place I'm looking at these days, power.
A few reflections come to mind here. I love your insight that confidence is a result, not a requirement. Um, Another thing is just what you mentioned there towards the end about, a lot of your life you were lacking confidence, and now this is the gift you're giving to the world, not confidence, but power. And then also about the research projects, like I've heard Tim Ferriss say that whenever he's choosing projects, he optimizes for two things: learning and relationships. Because then even if the project fails, he still wins going forward. I think that's just such a beautiful a way to approach things. Is it fair to say that your approach would be called inside coaching? Is this what you would term it as?
I haven't used that phrase before, but I'm always coaching for an insight. Yeah, I mean, my podcast is called One Insight because, and you'll hear on that podcast. So I have a bias for high performers. Those are my people, the people who play a really big game, high agency people who do a handful of things each day that have a big impact in the world. Those are my people. And so when I'm coaching someone like that, I don't need to draw out the 17-step plan and then hold them accountable. They're the kind of people who, once they have the right dream, the right mission, nothing will stop them. And so all I'm trying to do is see, how are they seeing the world? What are the lenses through which they see the world? And where are the limitations for their world? This is why I like when we're on Zoom, because you can see the box around us and you know the limit. Now, I've only just moved to England. I've been in California for 20 years. I had a studio in LA, and I would press a button right now, and there was a camera behind me, and you'd see the rest of my office. Then you'd see where it was messy, and the kids' bikes were in the corner, or the drum set over here. But most of the time, you just see this professional background behind me. And that's the world that people live in. They see the world through these lenses. And as a coach, you get to go, oh, that's how you see the world. Well, what if you put these lenses on? Or what if you turned 1 degree over there? And when they do that, they have an insight. And once they have an insight, everything changes.
So it's almost like we're all seeing the world through this our own frame, and we have limitations to what we're actually able to see. So our job as coaches then is to help the person step out of that frame temporarily, and that's where an insight comes in, and then that's where they can make a big change, particularly people that are high agency, high performers, and you don't need to hold their hand through the process.
Nice. Yeah. I coach through telling stories and sharing distinctions. And a distinction is so here's an example. I don't have many distinctions around wine. I don't know if you're a wine drinker. I'm not really. I have a couple of distinctions. It either has a cork or a screw top, it's either red or white. And if it has a pretty picture on the bottle, I'll probably buy it. I don't have much agency around wine. But my friend's wife is a sommelier. I've been at their house when she's brought out these little vials, 73 different vials, and she'll smell each one and tell you the vineyard it comes from. So she has a lot more power around wine. She has more distinctions around wine than I do. She's able to swirl the wine in a glass and see how slowly it runs down the side of the glass, and that will mean something. So she can tell more about wine than I can because distinctions give you power. And what I'm looking for, what I'm listening for, is the distinctions by which my clients see the world. And then what other distinctions might change everything. You want to hear an example? I was coaching a woman who'd been in corporate for 20 years, was looking at stepping out, becoming an entrepreneur, but was afraid. And I coached her for a couple of years around what would happen next. And then I asked her once, like, well, you're still here. Like, what's going on? There's something, you say you want to be out, but you're still there. So you don't want to be out. She said, well, what I've realized is that money gives me freedom. And I have a high value on freedom. So I can't leave because all this money I have, she was making at least $250,000 a year in corporate, money gives me freedom. So I paused for a moment and I said, what if freedom gave you money? And it shook her a little bit. She didn't quite understand it. Often a client, when you give a new distinction, will say, can you say that again? Doesn't quite like, they can't quite hear it yet. She's been a client of mine for now 11 years. She makes $1 million a year right now. She's a coach these days. And she, on a regular basis, will talk about that one distinction changed her life. She had to sit with it for a while. She had to live into it for a while. But now she knows that freedom brings her money. So her job is to create more freedom in her life, and the money will just follow. Now, what I want to add is one parenthesis to that story, which is this. I'm not trying to teach a formula. So if you're listening to this, it doesn't mean that's you need to live into that. That was her distinction. That was what she needed. And when I'm coaching, because I work with very unique individuals, I'm not trying to draw out a life lesson that anyone can apply. This was her distinction that changed her life.
But the thing that's really interesting to me here is your approach and how much intention you must be listening with to be able to see the distinctions this person is drawing in their world, and then to play with them and reflect them back to them in a way that creates that insight. That is a seems to be a superpower.
It looks like a superpower because it's something I put my attention on for many, many years. You see an expert at martial arts or basketball, tennis, you name it, they look amazing at what they do because they've immersed themselves in something. I've been coaching for over 20 years. Before that, I was a teacher for 15 years. So that was also related to this work. So I've been doing this work for a long time. So I'm listening. When I'm coaching somebody, I'm listening to my own body. What is my body telling me? Oh, I'm getting tight in my left shoulder here. And I might even just say that to her. Hey, I notice I'm getting my shoulders tight over here. And they'll say, me too. Or it's not my shoulder, it's my tummy. And then we've got somewhere to go, but I'm listening on the inside. I'm listening over there to your body language. I'm listening to your words. I'm listening to the context of your words. I'm listening to what's being said and what's not being said. I'm listening to the energy behind your words. So I'm tracking on about 7 different levels all at the same time.
Huh. It reminds me of a quote from the Prosperous Coach, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it was something along the lines of magic is simply spending more time on something than anybody else could possibly believe. Something like that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, just a quick one out of curiosity. To have that level of awareness, do you have any kind of mindfulness practice, anything that you use to cultivate that? Or is this just through your work you get this?
So I don't. Meditate. I'm not sure as Westerners we're really designed to meditate, but I do have all sorts of practices. And I've been doing the work for a long time. So I have worked with somatic coaches on body based work. I've worked with mindset coaches. I've been in a small, private, closed men's group for 15, 16 years now. The six of us, there's a leader at NASA. There's a man who runs a nonprofit, a wolf sanctuary, who takes care of 50 wolves, and those wolves help kids who are struggling. A man who's a headhunter for the world's top CEOs. This group of six of us, and we weren't doing this work 16 years ago. We were in the early stages of whatever our careers were. We've done the work together for years. So a few years ago, I wanted to study intuition. So I started working with Sonia Choquette. She's one of the world's experts on intuition. I said to Sonia, look, Sonia, I'll be honest with you. I'm a scientist by background, and you talk to angels. I'm not even sure angels exist. And she said, well, don't worry. Bring your scientific mindset to studying intuition. So I never stop doing the work. I'm always learning.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it must be so great to be in that group, and they sound like amazing people, and to be getting those such varied perspectives, someone who keeps wolves and someone from NASA, etc., on board, and to be spending that amount of time together must be so powerful. In the preparation for this, Rich, you sent over a really helpful video with some things I was curious to ask you about, and one of the things that you specialize in is helping people build a word of mouth business in an algorithm driven world. So can you maybe just tell us, why is this so important, and what might be the key principles of going about doing this?
My grandparents had a shop. They were immigrants from Europe, and they came here in the early 1900s, and they had a shop in a station, in an underground station in London. And literally, the shop was under the ground. I would go there, and when I was a kid, and it was a clothes store. They sold men's and women's clothing. Women's clothing on one side of this, and the other side was the men's. And my granddad, who had the menswear business, would see people walking past the shop, and he would say to them, "Hey, I remember that you like pocket squares. We've got some new ones in this week. Want to come and have a look?" He literally was in service of people, creating value for people through word of mouth. That's for most of human history. That was how we ran businesses. We've forgotten because the last 10 or 20 years, the internet has become a thing, and we know about internet marketing to build a business. But it wasn't there for most of human history. So what I'm teaching are the principles that go back, they're timeless. Throughout most of history, if you didn't create value for somebody, they didn't tell anybody else about what you did. What's interesting for coaches is I see coaches who have a word of mouth business often be quite apologetic. Like, well, I don't really do much to market my business. Hang on, you don't do much to market your business, and yet you have a business that brings in money for your lifestyle. That's amazing. The coaches who I work with don't have a sales team, don't have a marketing team. All they do is create value for people. And if you create enough value for people, they'll either come back for more or they'll tell other people about you.
Huh, for sure. Um, and another thing was, you were saying that whenever everybody else, or no, you pay very close attention to what everybody's doing, and then you ask, how can I do the opposite here? Can you tell us about the power of this, and maybe give us an example of where you've been able to apply this in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time. I'm constantly thinking about what are most people doing, because if you want to be successful, you should probably do the opposite of what most people are doing, because most people aren't successful, and most people are followers. So you have to step into leadership. So, when the economy starts to get shaky, like it is now. And I built my business, became a coach officially in 2006. So 2008, early stages of my business, the economy gets very, very shaky. And then 2020, we hit COVID. And both times, just like everybody else, I got super nervous. And then I realized, oh, what most coaches do when the economy gets shaky is lower their prices. Well, it makes sense, right? People think coaching is a discretionary expense when times are hard. So they stop spending on coaching. If I lower my prices, I might get more clients. Well, everyone else is doing the same thing. So you're in a race to the bottom. And it's only going to depend on who gets to the bottom first, who can win that game. It's not a game I want to play because it's not really a game I can win. So actually, what's counterintuitive is to raise your prices when the economy gets shaky. I've been working on a follow-up to the Prosperous Coach for a few years. Now, look, the last decade, I've been raising two kids. I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. Sometimes I'm hard on myself because my co-author, Steve Chandler, has written about a dozen books since the Prosperous Coach, and I haven't. I have written about 1 million words. I did a calculation the other day through my newsletter and articles and so on, which is about 13 books, but I haven't put another book out in the world. And I was kicking myself the other day because my next book comes out in January, next year. It's called $100,000 Clients, How to Find Them, Coach Them, and Keep Them. And I was kicking myself. I was thinking, oh my gosh, if we go into a recession, what a nightmare time to put that book out. What a mistake. I wish I got it out earlier. And then I realized, well, no, this is what I do. And actually, in a recession, there are going to always be people who thrive. Forget recession, even a shaky economy. And actually, one of the ways to thrive is to do what other people don't. So what if you raise your prices? What if you only work with people who have money, even if the economy is shaky? With companies who are willing to invest when the economy is shaky. So I'm kind of excited, a little bit nervous of the human part of me, but kind of excited too to have this book coming out next year. So there's a very real example of leaning into doing things differently.
And with that book, finding 100K clients, coaching them, and keeping them, anything you could share about how people can find that kind of client?
Well, so that's really the trick. So I don't use the word finding clients. I talk about creating clients. And that book I've designed as a coaching experience. I realized, well, I'm going to write a book about how to get 100K clients. How do you get 100K clients? You create so much value that people think it's a no-brainer to invest $100,000 over here because I can see I'm going to get 10 times the value, whether it's financial and all sorts of other ways. So I've designed that book as a coaching experience. Every couple of chapters, there's a QR code that you'll click on and you'll see a video of me talking to my phone, so it feels very intimate. What did I say? How do you scale intimacy? I'm not trying to sell that book to 100,000 people. I'm not trying to get that book. I don't care if it's an Amazon bestseller or I'm not trying to get a New York Times bestseller. It's for the right people. And so I've designed it as a coaching experience. And one of the ways I like to coach is to have counterintuitive thinking, to mess with people's thinking, to provoke people's thinking. So what I couldn't say on the front cover is the language I use, which is creating clients. Clients are created. You don't find them. But I'd mess with your thinking once you come through the door and you buy that book, teaching you how do you create them? Because there's no secret doorway through which if you go through here, all the high-performing, high-fee clients are sitting just waiting for you to knock at the door. It doesn't work that way. But I'll mess with your thinking if you read that book in how you create them. If you want an example, I'll make it real for you. I was talking to one of my clients about an idea that I've loved for a long time. If you're the most interesting person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I taught this concept at one of my events I have a mastermind for elite coaches called 4PC, the 4% Club. And she left and flew home. She's a tiny woman, about 5'0", and she was in the lounge at the airport, and she said to herself, well, who's the most interesting person in the room? And it was a guy who was about 7 feet tall, had big rings on every single finger. And she went up to him and said, hey, you look like the most interesting person in the room. We should talk. And he just loved, no one talks to someone like that. He just said, and they had this great conversation. It turns out that he plays in the NFL and she now coaches people at the NFL.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Love it. Right. There's about 100 questions I want to ask you, Rich, but I think the best way to show your approach to coaching is actually through coaching. So we could do that. But one thing before we get in there, you mentioned there, you've had this mentorship relationship with Steve Chandler. Is there anything in particular you learned from Steve that you feel was really impactful and really important on your trajectory?
Well, I wrote a book about it. It's the Prosperous Coach. One of the most challenging experiences I had with Steve was, it's in the front of the book. Steve had this program. He's just retired recently, but For a long time, he taught coaches what was in that book, How to Build a Business by Serving People. And I wrote to him and said, Steve, I've just become a coach. I have no money. If you let me join your program for free, I'll pay you double at the end. And he wrote back to me, and he'd just written a blog post about making bold requests. And I thought, oh, he's got to say yes to this. I'm making a bold request. And he said some words that changed my life, because he said, I want the rich who can make the money first. And I hated it. I hated it. It was like, dude, you just told me to make a bold request. How can you turn me down? But I went away and I did what it took, and I made the money, and I went back and I worked with him, and I learned from him. And I worked with him for a year, and I went back for a second year. It was a no-brainer. I would learn a new distinction, a new tool, a new idea, some new language. And I went back for a third year. And people began to say to me, well, you could teach this stuff, Rich. Why do you keep learning from Steve? And it was like, well, one idea can make me tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I went back for a fourth year. And after that, Steve said, hey, do you want to write a book together one day? So, but that distinction changed everything for me. I want the guy who can make the money first. Mr. Beast, do you know Mr. Beast, the YouTuber? I realize sometimes if you have kids, you know who Mr. Beast is. If you don't have kids, you may not know who he is. He's one of the most popular YouTubers out there. He has hundreds of millions of views of his videos. And he says he's asked all the time, how do I build a business on YouTube? And he says, go away and make 100 videos. And when you've made 100 videos, come back and ask me any question you want, and I help you. Because almost nobody does that. And that's the work, doing the work without some special secret, someone to guide you and teach you. Do the work first. And so that's the biggest lesson I learned from Steve. You've got to do the work.
Definitely, definitely. Right. Okay. Will we just jump in for a bit of coaching?
Well, let me set some context for everyone who's watching and listening. Niall's being very brave right now, because I wrote to him and I sent him a video message before this conversation. And I said, listen, I can be a great guest. I can answer all your questions. We can have fun. I can teach some great ideas and distinctions for people. But my zone of genius is coaching. If you're brave, let me coach you. Let's play. And you said yes. What I also said is, look, if we get to the end of this coaching conversation and you've shared something you don't want to go out into the world, or it doesn't feel great to either of us, we don't have to put it out there. And that allows both of us to relax a little bit. I don't have to perform now, like, oh my God, I'm going to be on camera. Let me come out with something to really challenge you, and vice versa. Let me bring something powerful to the. No, we just get to relax, which is the best way. I say this, I've recorded about 220 episodes of my podcast. All it is coaching, episode after episode. And I still say the same thing every time. And we relax and we go somewhere interesting. What I also said to you is, I don't do remedial coaching. So you don't need to come to me with a problem that we need to solve. That's how most coaches work. I like to coach around impact. So when I'm coaching around impact, it means we start a conversation not knowing where we're going to go. Let me ask you a question now. What's on your mind right now?
So a few things. I'm about to finish the fourth draft of my first book, and hopefully be self-publishing that next year. We're transitioning our business model into mostly live experiences. We're going to be doing one in April and one in October, and I'm not sure yet on the content for October yet. So those would be probably the two main things that are kind of floating around up there at the moment.
That excites me, because you're speaking my language on both of those. I'm about this Thursday, in fact, I start a program called 100K Book. How do you write a book that generates $100,000 in clients? And what I'm teaching is how to write a tiny 80-page book that speaks to your dream clients. And the other side of the thing about experiences that you mentioned, Sam Altman was interviewed recently, the founder of OpenAI, ChatGPT. What do you think will not change in the next decade with AI coming in? And he said, people who create unique boutique experiences for people to get together with extraordinary people. And so you're speaking my language. I do both of those things. They're really fun to do. And it's fun to be in person. Oh, it's great that we can connect like this over the magic of the internet, because it will be hard to get together in a room. But to get together in a room is even more fun.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I went to a talk from the go to market, or the the former CMO of OpenAI, and that's what he was saying. He's like, if you're going to survive the future, you've got to do the things that AI can't do, and that is in the flesh experiences with interesting people. You know,
Yes, 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 yes. So what's scaring you about what's coming next?
um, I wouldn't say scared. I think for me, they're time sensitive, these experiences, because we did our first one in October there, where it's essentially we're combining walks on the Camino de Santiago with internal work in the morning. So we do the work in the mornings and workshops, then we walk Camino in the afternoon. So it's a really unique thing, and it works really well. But the thing is, that's time sensitive. So I'm sort of playing with the idea next year of potentially doing one with multiple speakers, where we say we have 5 speakers, a different speaker each day, all around a specific theme. So that's quite time sensitive. So I really need to move forward with making bookings and reaching out to speakers, etc., etc. But I have a lot on my plate as it is, so it's sort of just like making the time and space to do that, and yeah, not burning out, I suppose.
Hmm. So it's great that you're thinking about not burning out. That's important because those of us who are high performers know that one on a regular basis. We can, because we love to do what we do, we can burn out. It's interesting for me that you say, I've got so much on my plate. What I find is that when someone finds something, when a high performer in particular finds something that they really need to put a stake in the ground for, time just opens up. So it looks like we've got too much on our plate. What that means is we're not doing things that are an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. Because when things are an 8, 9, or 10, people come up to us and go, how did you manage to do all that in that time? Well, we bend time. We bend time and we're focused on things that are an absolute hell yes to us.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, another part of this that I didn't mention is the one in April. I'm going to be for the first time, no, for the second time, I'm going to be teaching some of the principles and practices and things that are in my book. And for me, that's a big leap, because I'm used to being the person that brings in people like yourself who teaches. So me to actually lead something for myself is like, I think that's going to take a lot of mental bandwidth, and there's going to be probably quite a bit of imposter syndrome there as well. So I think that's why I'm saying that maybe it feels like a lot to sort of do all of these things at once.
So now we're talking. So I have a distinction around imposter syndrome. I say if you don't have imposter syndrome, you're not playing big enough. Most people online are trying to teach you how to get rid of imposter syndrome. I think it's great that you're feeling it. It means you're at an edge. So good on you. That sounds fantastic. What's the book called?
It's working title, but The Aligned Creator.
So this is your heartfelt project, right? This is important to you to get out into the world.
For sure, for sure. Like a small bit of context. Like I kind of believe there is a creative intelligence at work in our world. Whether people you want to call it the universe, God, a higher power, whatever. And I think the more aligned we are internally, then the more that force has access to us. And so the book is really all about like how do you actually create that alignment and the different frameworks I've found in my own life for actually creating that. So then it feels less like I'm doing the work and something else is kind of doing the work through me, and I'm just along for the ride.
Nice. That is the heart of creativity, right? When you time just flies, you're inspired. It's like you're channeling. It's coming through you, not from you. Yeah, I totally get that. That feels exciting. Now I'm interested because I feel all that passion about this, and it's not even my book. What's missing for you? Because you gave me the intellectual side of it, not the visceral side of it.
Um, what's missing? I don't know what's missing, but I would say, like when I think about, say, say there was some high profile leaders coming on this this group we're taking away in April, and I imagine me teaching this stuff to them. I'm just like, who am I to who am I to step in front of these people and say that, here's these practices, etc., etc. That's the thing I struggle with. Like, we had a guy that's teaching an online course with us. He replied and said he was interested in joining. And I'm just like, how in God's name am I going to be able to stand up in front of him and say, here's what you should do, you know?
Well, so let me play with you around that one, because I used to be a teacher. I was a high school teacher, and I taught kids who didn't want to learn, teenage kids I teach them science. But we're not talking about that level of teaching. For the kind of people that you're teaching, it isn't. We used to call it chalk and talk back in the day. That's how boring teachers talked. They put the stuff on the board. Kids had to sit and learn and write down the facts. That's an old model that you're coming with. The new paradigm for teaching, the new model for teaching is, well, here's an idea. What do you guys think? Here's a question. What are your different answers? Here's how I think of it without any attachment to being right, or that you might have a different answer to me. What have you got? What have you taught that way instead of that old fashioned Victorian model that you're probably putting up here? Because if you're working with really talented, driven individuals, I mean, I told you, 20 years of studying and learning as a coach, I'm still here, still learning. So, but I don't want to go and sit down. I can't go to a lecture. That's not how I learn anymore. I learn by being in conversation. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that approach would definitely take the pressure off. And it's more aligned with my nature anyway. Like, I love asking questions and bringing people into conversations. I'm not very good at lecturing or going monologue. So that would really take the pressure off for sure.
So now as you imagine, you're either about to go for the walk on the Camino, or you've already just done it, or you've taken this group to a special place. And teaching feels different because you teach by asking questions. You teach by sharing some of the ideas that you've heard from other people. And you don't have to have the right answer, but they might. What shift happens in your body?
I really like just the phrase you said there. You teach by asking questions. That feels very true to me. So thank you.
Yeah. I can see you writing that down right now because you want that to land. You don't want to let that one go. And what we just created for you is a new distinction, a new way of seeing teaching. There's an old-fashioned approach to teaching that goes back to Victorian times, and that's dated even for kids these days. But for the really talented, driven, ambitious, successful people you want to spend time with, you're not going to sit down and read the contents of your book. If your book, let me backtrack. We so often teach what we need to learn now. We so often teach what we need to learn. What are you teaching? You're teaching them that the most powerful creativity comes when you channel, when you don't know what you're going to say next, but you feel inspired, when you don't care if you get it right or wrong, you're just on purpose, on mission, and it's coming through you. Dude, that's how you're going to teach.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, yeah.
So I was modeling it for you just then because I had to step into it and be it. And it didn't matter if you came back and said, no, I don't like that Rich, or it's different Rich. I'm not attached. I coach the way that you teach. I ask questions. I provoke people's thinking. And I'm not attached to being right or wrong. I can give you a way of showing up in one moment, and 2 minutes later, I would say the opposite. Or someone else walked through the door. I'd teach them something different because I'm not trying to create a formula or a framework, and nor are you. You're teaching a way of inspired, what you call aligned creativity. And that doesn't come from making lists and doing things the same way.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's yeah, and that's how you show up. That's how you've shown up for this interview. Is you said, like, let's see what happens. Let's be vulnerable. Let's be open, and let's see what comes through. And that requires a bit of courage, but it's the best. That's when you're most fully alive. You know.
So here's the word. The word courage comes from the French and from the Latin, cœur, meaning heart. Courage is following your heart. It did take a little bit of courage to say this. What happens if we didn't get to an insight in our coaching experience? What if you thought I was crap at what I do? You know what? I let that go. Let me lean into what I think could be really magical And we've gone there. And courage is different to confidence. Confidence is a result. You get the confidence later, but you do need a bit of courage first. And you'll need that too. The first time you do this, you'll need a bit of courage, but you know what you're doing. Somebody said to me recently, they said, Rich, what I admire about you, you always know where you're going. I said, no, I don't. I really know where I'm going. You just see, I've had these things that have been successful, so you think I knew where I was going. Oh, I didn't. This thing only worked because that one didn't, and that one didn't, and this one didn't work, but you didn't see it. But whilst I don't know where I'm going, I do know who I am. And that's my invitation for you, Niall. If you're teaching this book around aligned creativity, all you need to do every morning is align with who you are, and the creativity will flow.
It's really funny you're saying this because so I mentioned this is the fourth draft. The first draft, I thought I'm going to write this in 6 months and I'll be done with it. And that was all about, this, you got to have like a 5-year plan, this long-term thing. And more, the final version is very similar to what you're saying, where the most important thing is to know thyself and, come from that place. And then I don't think you can really have a 5-year plan in the modern world. You've got to be ready to adjust to new opportunities as they appear and take advantage. So interesting that you share that.
Yeah, well, Mike Tyson said it best. Everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face.
Yeah, yeah,
So the planning is valuable, but being in the moment, improv is a great way to live life and run a business. Learn about improv comedy, improvisational music. You have to put some parameters around, otherwise it's not improv. But once you put the parameters around, you can play how you want to play, and that's what you're teaching. And this aligned creativity. So get clear. I'll finish with this. Get clear on where you're putting a stake in the ground. This is what is important to me, with no attachment to whether people like it or not. This is what I see. This is what I believe. I mean, you said, know thyself. You're teaching stuff that's thousands of years old. It's deep work, and it applies in this day too. Once you get in touch with that. And so let me pause here, because since I coach around an insight, you've already had your insight. Any more talking will just get us intellectualizing this. You're already there. You were there when you wrote those words on a piece of paper a few minutes ago, but I wanted to hold this for you. And we're there.
yeah. I looked down at the words there and I smiled, so that's a good sign. Right. Well,
So let me pause. I want to create a bit of space for a second, because you're about to come off the hot seat and you're going to come back into the mode of leading this interview with me. So I want to give a little bit of space for people who are listening or watching, and give a moment for you to check back in, because to switch from being a client to running the show, I want to give you a moment. If you are watching that, this is the fun of coaching talented, driven, ambitious people. You're not trying to create a 17-step plan for them. You are listening to the way that they listen to the world. You are listening to what's being said between the words, and you're reading their energy as much as what they say. And from that place, you get to play and have fun. I didn't know where we were going to go at the start of this conversation, but it's because I didn't know where we were going to go, we got to where we got. And so now I've given you a bit of space, Niall. Thank you for trusting me, man.
I appreciate it. And those last few sentences you just shared there, I just think there's, like you see quotes said 100 years ago, and it's a couple of lines, but there's so much power in whenever certain words are put together. And what you just shared, I think those few sentences, it's worth watching this interview just for those few lines. So thank you. Um, in terms of, do you have time for a few more questions before we wrap up?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Um, what role does writing play in the bigger picture of your life and work? This is a regular practice for you, I believe.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding. I calculated the other day, I've written 1 million words in the last 11 years or so, maybe more. Somebody once said to me, how do you have time for writing, Rich? And it's like, I can't not write. I'm always writing. So if I go to, oops, sorry about the noise. If I go to my phone and I look up I use Apple Notes to capture ideas. If I go to the notes page and I look at the different sections, I've got 800 notes that says article ideas. I've got 300 notes that say 4PC ideas. 4PC is my community of elite coaches. I've got 111 notes for the book, the next book I'm writing. I'm writing a book right now called Beyond Success. It's for post-exit founders, people who've sold their business for hundreds of millions of dollars and wondering what's next. I've got 850 notes on the deep dive. I'm writing all the time, and I made a commitment many years ago that I'll put out 2 long-form newsletters a week. So I'm always writing, and it hones my thinking.
Yeah, Kevin Kelly says, I don't know what I think until I write about it, or something like that. And that's been my experience. I do a monthly newsletter as well. And it's funny, I'll start off with one idea and think that's what it's about. But the more you get into it, then it turns into something completely different. And you're like, oh, that's what it was about, you know?
And I'll be honest, I began experimenting with ChatGPT a couple of years ago, and I started to use it to hone my articles. And what I've realized in the last 12 months is every article I see uses ChatGPT. Everyone's using AI. I saw something on LinkedIn a few days ago, somebody criticizing how people are using AI to write their articles. And I took the text and put it into AI and said, what's your confidence this was written by AI? And it was 85%. It's like everyone's using it. So what I've realized is, whilst I love using AI as a thinking partner to brainstorm, I rarely use it to write anymore. Because the more rough you can be, the more human you can be, the more people will trust you. And so I'm leaning into this edge of, no, I've got to come back to being me on every level. That's the bit that will, you said earlier, events are the things that AI can't do. Well, also rough and real writing is what AI can't do.
Hmm. Um, Another thing that I'm curious to ask you, Rich, is you strike me as a very fully alive human being. You're you seem to be you seem to have access to a vitality, a power, something that is that animates you. That and I'm just curious, like, have you always been like that, or is this something that you cultivate? And if so, what do you think? What leads to this?
But first of all, there's a quote I love by Howard Thurman. He said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is more people who've come alive. So I'm fortunate. I've had a career my entire life, 15 years as a teacher and 20 years as a coach, where I got to do something that I loved. As a teacher, it's a vocation. I didn't make a lot of money as a teacher. I taught in high schools. I taught in Africa for 2 years. I taught in Southeast Asia for 4 years, helped to set up an international school. I taught in inner city London, and it was challenging and I loved it. And so I was animated and alive by that career. And I've had the same experience with coaching. I love it. I get to sit down with people to mess with their thinking, to shift the way they see their world, and their world changes. That makes me feel alive. But I live a very real human life, right? I've just moved my family from LA, where I've lived for 20 years, back to London, where I grew up. I've got an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. I did a training with Chris Voss a few years ago, the former FBI hostage negotiator. He said, why are you here, Rich? I said, Chris, I can do high-level complex negotiation, but my 11-year-old runs rings around me. Teach me how to negotiate with him, and I've got my money's worth. So I live a real life. I've been married for 19 years, just our anniversary 2 days ago. And it's not always easy being in a relationship, being married. And so I have a very real life.
And that's the woman you proposed to after what, 10 days or something? Is that right?
I did. So 20 years ago, I lost my job as a teacher, went off to Thailand to lick my wounds. I had some playing cards with coaching questions on, began coaching people on a beach, came to the US to do a course about coaching. I figured I'd need some kind of certificate to say I was a coach. And at another workshop that I went to, a transformational workshop, I met this woman. And then when we left, they said, don't make any life-changing decisions for the next 2 weeks. which is what I say when I lead transformational workshops. It's good advice. And sometimes it's good to break good advice. And so I proposed to Monique 10 days after I met her. She didn't tick all the boxes of the woman I thought I was supposed to be with. In fact, I said to her 2 days ago for our anniversary, 19 years in, I said, I'm so glad I would do this again. I would propose to you again. It hasn't always been easy. There have been times when we almost split up. It's challenging sometimes raising kids and having businesses, and she's a creative, and it's been challenging, but I would do it again because the risk I took was saying yes to something that didn't make sense. You're supposed to marry the person who intellectually meets you on every level. Well, 50% of marriages don't work, and probably 50% of the other 50% are secretly and quietly not working. So we're working because we're working at this marriage. And so, yeah, I'm ever so grateful I took that crazy risk all those years ago.
Um, right. Before we wrap up, I know that creating value is, you know, that's your sort of modus operandi. And this has been insanely valuable both for me and anybody that's listening. Is there anything else that you haven't shared yet that you think might be valuable for coaches listening to this to hear?
So when I moved from California to London almost 3 months ago, I kept all my coaching calls on California time, which is why it's 5 in the evening now and I'm talking to you. I would never do this in LA. I would have been speaking in the afternoon. By 2 o'clock, I was finishing my day in LA. But I decided to take a risk and do something different. And I kept my coaching calls, and from about 2 p.m. I start work, 2 till 5, 2 till 6, 3 or 4 days a week, which means that when we put the kids on the school bus at 7:30 in the morning, I've got time for me. So I go to the gym every single day. I take the dog for a walk. I'm trying to hit 13,000 steps a day, so I walk 6 miles a day. The other day, I was talking to someone at the gym, and I realized I'm not hitting I'm not where I want to be when it comes to strength and fitness yet. And they said, "Well, you've got to start tracking your food, your nutrition." And I hate tracking. It's boring. It's not sexy. It's not fun. I don't enjoy it. But I got a tracking app for the food, and I realized, oh yeah, I'm way off on my targets. So I need to eat a lot more protein if I want to grow muscle. I need to cut down on carbs more than I realize. And so tracking really counts. I have a community I call the 100K Club, where I work with coaches who want to get their next 100K in business or sign their first 100K client. And we track how much money they make in proposals, not income, because income is a lag indicator. How much money you make in proposals is a lead indicator. So is how many no's you collect. Nobody wants to hear the word no, but the more no's you get, the more yeses are coming down the road. So you have to track this stuff. It's really boring tracking my macros. I hate it. I have to put everything into this app. I don't enjoy it, but it makes a difference. And it's really boring tracking the stuff about building a coaching business. How many people did you connect with? How many people did you serve? How many no's did you collect? How many dollars or pounds did you make in proposals? But if you do that, the results are clear. In fact, we just wrapped a 100K Club, the last cohort. Between them, they made $5 million in proposals, $1.7 million in revenue. It works. So the boring stuff that you don't enjoy, you don't do it because it's fun. You do it because the results are fun.
Yes. Yes. Marshall Goldsmith said very similar. Like he's obsessed with tracking things. He thinks it's probably the most important thing in coaching. So you guys share that. Um, Rich, this has been really fun. Thank you so much. It's felt like play. I know you're a big man for that. Um, where can coaches listening to this that want to dive deeper with you, maybe take a program with you, where would you send them after this conversation?
I had a chat once with a guy who's an internet marketing expert, became my friend, and he said, Rich, your business is like if you went to the mall and all these stores, there are a whole bunch of stores with beautiful lights and displays in the windows. And your store, it's hard to see what's in the store, and it's hard to get through the door. But when you get through the door, you astonish people with how you take care of them, the value you create for them. The other stores look fancy on the outside. Once you come through, there's no substance to them. And so I don't know how people get on my email list now. I don't do any internet marketing. You can go to richlitvin.com. I mean, go to my website and there is a sign up page there. But, once you come through the door, that's where we create the magic. And so we're still a word of mouth business. I'm doubling down on that. But yeah, my website, richlitvin.com, my podcast, put my name into YouTube. You'll find me online. I've been creating content and ideas online for many, many years.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much, Rich. I want to wish you the best going forward, and we'll hopefully talk again soon.
Thank you, my friend.